The meaning of life is determined by will, in particular, will to power. So you can either look for a meaning produced by some other will, or use your own will to produce your own meaning. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert de Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. It is now almost a complete third anniversary of creation of this channel, or at least the uploading of the first video, which is kind of hilarious. I mean, it was obviously the Fool's Day, right? So I'm recording this on March 30th. And it will be probably available on Patreon tomorrow. Not sure. Maybe I'll edit it some more, but we'll see. And like 2 weeks later, I'll upload it on my regular YouTube channel, right? Or rather, make it open for viewing. And obviously, such an anniversary is a really good time to discuss this ultimate age-old problem of philosophy. In particular, the meaning of life, right? But obviously, as well, just as well, it cannot be solved from within the philosophy because, well, it kind of transcends philosophy, or at least it's comparable in size to the philosophy, right? If you assume that it's the main question of philosophy, then you have to transcend philosophy to solve it, something like that, right? Using this really crude dialectic. So maybe we'll need some meta-philosophy or philosophy to solve this question. So let's begin. So a motivation for this thought, like I thought about making this video for a while actually, and it's very simple. Like if you watch this channel for a while, you'll probably know the answer, or at least you can guess what it is. But anyway, the motivation was my brief exchange, like almost literally like drinking coffee in the corridor of one of the conferences. Claridge many times stated, did I already say it was Michael Claridge? Well, it was anyway. So it was my exchange with him. So he many times stated that when he observes the universe, like large-scale structures, etc., how the stars work or apparently work, he can't escape the feeling of that they serve some purpose. You know, there is some meaning to what's going on to them, right? And my point, by that then already and by now still, is that kind of I tried to reflect on that thought. All right. So what I said was that, and what I'm saying to you right now is that. If we state there is a purpose, we imply, even though we may not notice it, that there are some goals, right? The purpose is impossible without goals. The purpose is literally how is this thing serves our goal. Like we say, we have a cell in a body which has like ion channels, transferring ions here and there from inside to outside and vice versa of the cell. And they serve a purpose, right? They transfer ions, but there is a goal why this purpose is there in the first place, and the goal is for the cell to live and to grow, etc., right? So hopefully this example shows you my point. And it's actually not my point, again. You might have guessed it's Nietzsche's point, which I just ruminate upon in this video, right? So ultimately, it's the will that shapes purpose and meaning, our own will in particular. So the meaning of life is whatever you will it to be, right? I'm using the word will instead of wish. Meaning is where the purpose is, and purpose follows from will. And that's basically the main point of this video. So we may wrap up already, actually, but I'll still ruminate some more on this. So let's talk about religion and morality for a moment. In particular, like it's really what it is ultimately like implying that there is a greater will, like God, for example, you know, this proverbial mimetic Deus vult phrase, which literally means so is the will of God, you know, this is what the God wants, the God wills. Or like in case of religion, I mean, and in case of morality, it's like, well, maybe something more vague, like society. It's society's will for that to be the case, for us to behave in this way and not the other way, right? So, I mean, for us to fulfill our life with this meaning and not some other, right? So it is a bit of a trick, I believe, to manufacture this larger will, right? Ultimately as a projection of our own. But there is an interesting question in terms of what exists. Because you might say, well, society and God don't exist, right? Because, well, they're like intangible entities that only ultimately inhabit our heads or our souls or whatever you prefer. I don't mind, honestly. But as long as they impact your behavior, I would say they exist, right? They manifest themselves through your behavior. So it's kind of a tough question, but never mind. It's a digression. So, and one more point with regards to religion. It's obviously, as I've noted in one of my previous videos, like quite a long while ago, like maybe a year ago, but I don't remember which one, that like the invention of Christianity in particular, but I assume pretty much any other religion, is also serving a purpose, actually, of producing other, like perpendicular hierarchy, if you wish. So there is a hierarchy in society that some of us, or many of us even, don't like. So we would like to produce some other hierarchy. So you see, our will produces this particular new religion, let's say, which says, okay, we have this new thing, let's all like submit to this new thing, and this collective will impose new meaning into our lives, right? So again, sort of reiterating my general statement. So there is a will of Caesar, but there is a will of God as well, right? So we wish to follow the will of God, because in our estimate, God is much more larger than Caesar, right? Something like that. But you can see here, right, how meaning is created from will, ultimately, hopefully. So in this respect, in this discussion, what is meaningless? That's kind of an interesting question. Like meaningless life or meaningless in general? So I would claim that the statement about meaninglessness in itself carries meaning, as stupid as it may sound, right? So it sort of covers it with the veil of meaning. Like when we say that this is meaningless, we kind of impose meaning onto it, the meaning of it being meaningless, again, as stupid as it may sound. And also with regards to life, when we're, let's say, when we observe some like aesthetic piece, like a theatrical play or a movie or something else like that, where there is a sudden death of some character with like a completely unfinished character arc, so it kind of makes no sense, even within like the sort of framework of this work, this piece, like within the plot, within like any sort of mood, like paradigm of this piece, if you wish. So it also feels like meaningless, right? And it bears this emotional impact, emotional load, sort of. And it can be utilized both in tragedy and comedy for this particular reason, that we feel it as unfair, as meaning, like no, this shouldn't have happened, right? So yeah. Well, in tragedy. In comedy, maybe we just laugh at it. Ha ha ha, this guy just randomly died, right? In some very stupid way. By the way, this is actually like, meaninglessness is one of the devices of comedy, right? Some absolute absurdity, right? But in this case, the will of the author, which we submit to, and which gives meaning to what is happening is for us to have a good time, for us to laugh, right? So even in this case, it's meaningful. And in case of tragedy, the meaninglessness of somebody's death, let's say some completely tragic, unfortunate death, is exactly to make us feel this tragic, emotional response. So as you can see, I mean, it works even here. Even where something is meaningless, there is some meaning, and there is ultimately some will behind it. And by the way, watch my video, Bad Ending. I'll link it in the description as usual, where I talk about how these bad stuff that happens in, fictional works actually makes a lot of sense. So the statement that this has no meaning ultimately translates into, or means it's in itself, that there is no use in it for us, right? There is no use in it for our goals, which means we can't use it to our ends, ultimately, right? At least on this level where we call it meaningless. Of course, okay, I'm kind of going a little bit too far. I feel like it's going harder and harder to impose these additional layers of reflection here. So ultimately, our will discards this, whatever we call meaningless, as not helpful for its own increase, the wills, that is. And hence, by the way, there are different tastes, right? Different people have different tastes in art, for example. Like one person, their will, their cultural assembly of whatever their will is and whatever impacts it, considers this particular piece complete garbage. It's meaningless. It's not leading anywhere. It's not giving me the feeling of strength. So I discard it. I don't like this music. I don't like this type of movies. I don't like this director or this composer, right? While the other person might say, on the contrary, they might love them. They might say, this has so much sense to me, right? Because my will feels empowered by it, right? It serves the purpose of my will, right? Very well. That's kind of a fundamental nature of aesthetic differences, which might be scaled up to a level of cultures, by the way, not just people. So, last thing I wish to note is, actually I'm kind of returning to the previous point of religious practices, including astrology and other things like that, like divination, spirituality, like any sort of new age kind of stuff like that. And I don't mean anything bad about it, but I'll make this note at the end. So what are these practices doing to us is they ultimately, well, as I've said at the beginning, when we project our will onto God, this Batman projector, so in the sky, and we say, okay, this thing is gonna help us, okay? So we project our own will onto something larger, and we say, okay, and we use this mirage as an external will to impact us, even though in the first place we created it, ultimately, right? And by we, I don't even mean a specific person. It might be like a collective, but it's a more difficult question. So these practices help us to release our own will. We say, okay, it's Batman, it's not me anymore, right? It's not my projector, even though I'm right here with it. So at least it gives us an external beacon, if you wish, to orient our will onto, or with the help with, I don't know, something like that. And by the way, placebo effect is another form of religious response like that, because what's placebo? Well, it's kind of like astrology ultimately. Like, I give you something and I tell you it would help you. Okay, bear with me. And you say, okay, I believe it will help me. My will is for it to help me. Therefore, I actually impose a meaning of something that helps me into this piece of sugar or whatever it is. So yeah, maybe I'll actually feel better. I will to feel better. And now this little external crutch actually helps me, because now it's not just my desire. It's actually like the Batman, you know, the thing, the external thing now kind of commands me to feel better, right? Even though ultimately it's my own will projected onto it. So this is how it works, I believe, at least. So it focuses your efforts in some way, right? It gives them a point of origin, so to speak. So if astrology tells you, okay, or any sort of other divination, okay, today is a bad day to do this, whatever, like cutting your hair, going to the store, or whatever, like talking to a friend, you say, okay, since it's a bad day today to do it, like, whew, you know, my conscience is clear, I'm not doing it today, and I'm just doing some other stuff, right? I'll do this tomorrow, and it like releases a lot of pressure, you know. Now you're free to do some other things, let's say. Hopefully you can see the point. Or astrology tells you today is a good day to do something, and you say, okay, now I have Batman with me, you know, I'm gonna do this right now, and I believe in my success. And it obviously empowers you, it helps you actually achieve this stuff, whatever you're trying to. Even if you don't, if you kind of fail, well, you still tried your best because you believe that you're gonna succeed, you know. Even in cases when it says it's a bad day to do this, but you have to do it, so you go there and do it, nevertheless, it still helps you because now you have sort of more vigilance, you know. You are more careful, you are more attentive, you're trying not to make any mistakes, not to encounter any problems along the way. So it also helps, right? It kind of sharpens your will a little bit, right? All right. Penultimate note I wish to make here is the Theodor Adorno, the German philosopher and sociologist, made a really interesting observation how belief in astrology correlates to conformity. And I think from what I've said previously, it's not a big miracle, right? Because conformity means I want to follow, right? My will is feeling most comfortable when I follow somebody, like something big. And this big thing might be astrology, right? As a particular case. So, yeah. And again, returning to what I've noted previously, I have nothing against astrology. In fact, I actually think that modern developments in like you know, studying the interstellar space and like more fine experiments in particle physics and astrophysics and astronomy, like, well, not experiments in astronomy, but astronomical observations, they actually hint at some new possibilities for astrology. And if you wish, again, I'll link a video of mine about this in the description. Not a video of mine per se, but a presentation of mine. And I actually have an idea how you can prove astrology to be correct. And I think it's actually fairly easy to do in principle. But then again, like it's a viable project. Like I know what we need to do, and it's fairly easy, but it requires a certain budget, which I don't have. So there you go. Maybe someday. Maybe someday. Okay. All right, so let's conclude this round. Ultimately, it's what I've said at the very beginning, right? That the meaning of life is determined by will, in particular, will to power. So you can either look for a meaning produced by some other will, or use your own will to produce your own meaning. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing.